Dan Doty, welcome to What's the Big Idea, brother? How are you today?
I'm great, man. Good to see you. Glad to be here.
You too, buddy. I'm very excited to be chatting with you. You are one of the few return guests to What's the Big
Yeah,
Idea. Very
right
much so.
on. I'm
But,
honored.
when we first connected, we were talking a lot about men's work, and that journey led you to this new pursuit, new area of exploration. I'm not going to say new focus, but additional area of focus for you of, let's call it service learning, volunteerism, which I am a lifelong fan and advocate for. And so I'm stoked to have you today, brother.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's intricately connected to our first conversation. It's very much a part of that same conversation. That was a long time ago, right? That was 5 years ago,
That
six
was
years ago,
that was
something.
right
Yeah,
right before the world shut down. You were like
exactly.
the last conversation I had in that tiny little bungalow in Santa Barbara, which, like, of all the places that I could have been trapped in the world, like that was probably like one of the best. Yeah. Beautiful, man. Well, dude, I always like to start the show just with a little bit of appreciation of, like, why do I want to chat with this person? And I felt it when we first chatted, and I still feel it today, that I think that, when I look at this wave of men's work that popped up, in the post Me Too era, kind of early 2020s, I look at you as one of the people who is really at the tip of the spear and doing that from a deep place of integrity and honesty, and also just bringing this aura of, like, traditional masculinity of someone who hunts and is an epic fucking father, but just willing to pair that with kind of like a more modern, emotion forward model of masculinity, and like making it more accessible for many, many men. So I'm really grateful that you exist. I'm grateful that, we've become closer over the years, and, now to be able to support you in this new thing that you have going on, man. So very excited to have you today.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel that. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, brother. All right. Well, so I'm going to just let you kind
Yeah.
of take the wheel here a little bit of, like, take me to the moment where this really emerged for you of, like, what happened, what became clear to you, and what is this new thing that you're excited to bring into the world?
Yeah. So here's the point, or sort of, yeah, here's the backstory a little bit. Is my first real thrust with men's work was with the organization Everyman. Some people might know that, some people might have never heard of that. Our whole intention behind that, which still exists, right? I'm no longer a part of it, just to put that caveat out there, but which still exists. The first thrust that we had was to help men, first of all, give them permission, and then give them skills and access to both their body and their emotional life, right? And it was quite a revolution. I mean, we weren't the only ones doing this. We weren't the first ones doing it, but the act itself is quite a revolutionary act, which is saying, "Hey, dudes, we're missing out on a huge part of life. Our society has told us, maybe from young boys for a long time, we're not supposed to have this part of us. We're not supposed to express these things, these parts of us which are real and true." And we did that, right? And we had a wild, wonderful time doing that. And so I had about a 5 run period where, we ran retreats and expeditions and started groups, and just like we're all in on this thing. Now, what I want to point out here is that where it initially started, where it initially began, was one of my mentors and co-founders, Owen Marcus. He brought a bunch of his practice and knowledge of somatic psychotherapy and emotions into it, and I came from a much smaller background, but one that I started out men's work in the David data world, which is a kind of a different, juxtaposed style of men's group. And I guess what I want to highlight there is that the initial part of every man, there was this deep inward looking, this deep self-awareness, this emotional honesty, and the vulnerability with others. But there was also a very full and balanced outward action part of it. Those original groups were just as much inward looking and then outward action into the world. And what I saw happen in Every Man over the years that we did, we had such a, like, literally an explosive energy with the emotionality and the inward part, that we didn't keep up We didn't create the structure or the conduit for that outward action to happen. So what I saw, and it hurt me to see this, was a lot of men who got stuck in the processing, stuck in the feelings, and their lives didn't go anywhere. Their lives didn't make much change. They weren't embodying or expressing the goodness that they were finding inside of them in a way that actually counted. Right. And so, in the process of being away from that community and doing other things, I just sort of this played out over several years. And what I observed happening in a large sense in the men's community, in the men's work community, is you would go off to Men's Work Island, for a weekend or for a night, and you would fucking look different and you would talk different and you would hold yourself different and you would enunciate differently. You would be on Men's Work Island. Like, we could do an anthropological study about this. It's fucking weird, right? Let's be honest. Anybody who's in a men's group, check yourself. Is it fucking weird? If it is, it's probably fucking weird. So we go to Men's Work Island and all this stuff happens. And don't get me wrong, it's really good stuff. Really, really good stuff happens. It liberates a lot of energy. It liberates a lot of yourself. It liberates and opens up and gives you access to immense good things. But I think that much of the problem that I've seen stems from that. Then there's nowhere to put those things. There's no channel for that energy to run into. And so one of my close friends and mentees and colleagues, Devin Walker, and I have been musing on that for a long time and observing it and talking about it, and associating it with a lot of other historical things too, such as the old school wave of men's organizations like the Elk Society or the fucking Masons or all of these things. And what were those organizations all about? Service. That was the organizing function that those historical groups would come, is that men would come together to do good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have created a nonprofit that is just getting off the ground called Manpower. We're slightly, I think, still self-aware of the name. I like the name Manpower. Like, what we're basically doing is organizing men in their local communities to ask and find out what needs to be done, and then providing the manpower to go do that. So what that looks like in practice is literally sometimes just getting on a local nonprofit service organization that puts up volunteer opportunities, and it's literally just plugging men into them as a collective group to go get their hands dirty. And so the bigger point here, the why behind this, is that men are hurting, and men's mental health is in a really bad place, poised to go into an even badder, worse place. And we also have just like disconnected, fragmented communities, right? So it ideally, our core value is simplicity here. Simply, what we're trying to do is create the conditions and the spark for men to come together and have in-person time and make some bonds, and then go out into their community. And we think that this could be one of our hypotheses here. Is we're going to start with existing men's communities and just say, hey, you're doing all this good shit. What if you also, boop, plugged into your community and made good on this good shit you're doing with yourself? So that's my quick overview.
Beautiful. I love the simplicity of it. And tell me, what is the power of service as it comes to, I always think about the frame as a facilitator myself of state change versus behavior change. And are you optimizing your teaching for state change or behavior change? And so tell me a little bit about how service is kind of a pathway into more sustainable behavior change in your eyes.
Yeah, good question. I may rely on you to fill in the blanks there. I haven't thought that one through, but I'll tell you how it feels, first of all. Um, we've done a handful of initial events to kick this off and to test this out, right? And the first one I did, we were living in Maine. We just moved, but we were living in Maine, in a little town on the coast. And in February, a couple years ago, a local family's house burned down on the coldest night of the year. Literally, it was the coldest night of the fucking year. House burned down, complete devastation. And this family didn't have the resources to clear out the rubble. They didn't have the resources. And so, it happened in February. Time went on. The city started to get annoyed and worried about chemicals in the water table and all this stuff, and they were about to launch a campaign to basically evict these people. And that was all unbeknownst to me. In the meantime, Dev and I were kind of creating this organization and this frame, and I literally sent one email to a neighbor that said, "Hey, I think I can put together about 15 dudes, and we're looking for a really meaningful service project, right?" And she said, "Holy shit, I can't believe you emailed today. This is what's happening. Could you come? Could we put something together for this house?" So it was just like kismet. It was an amazing opportunity. So it took about 6 weeks, but I pulled together about, I think maybe 18 or 19 guys showed up, and we got about $10,000 donated. We got two dudes with tractors and skid steers that donated their time and machinery use, and we got a wicked deal on wicked. See, I'm from Maine. I can't believe I just said that. We got a wicked deal on the giant containers, refuse containers, right? That get filled and taken to the dump. Anyway, we just sort of saying, yes, we're going to do this. Just like all of a sudden, churches came out of the woodworks and ladies cooked us hot dishes and people donated pizza. And like, dude, it was, and this was right in post-COVID times, living in this small town, not feeling really a part of the town, not knowing how to connect to people really deeply. This simple act of saying, "Yeah, we'll help," and like doing some emails to get people in there, it just like whew, it was like this whole thing just like came like out of nowhere. It was amazing. And then we showed up at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning to this house with just like, reeking of fire and all kinds of shit, and the whole yard was a mess. And it took us 5 hours. It took us 5 hours. And the we started with a circle. Everybody, sort of had a basic prompt of who they were and why they showed up, and just started a little bit of the vibe of a men's group. Nothing intense, but just like the basics, right? And then we got to work together, right? And the conversations that happened between guys, and um the upwelling of like just basic human goodness that was just so obviously felt by everybody there, and then we at the end we circled back up and we answered another prompt, and it felt, I don't think I had felt that level of usefulness and joy in a really, really, really long time, right? And that's been the consistent in the other test pilot projects that we've done, which is just that guys are blown away by how it feels, both to be together, to be physical in their bodies, and to be doing something that actually like means something, or that like directly impacts other people. So there's your state change answer, right?
Yeah.
There's the answer, like what is the state that can be created by this, which I think is just unequivocally good, right? There's goodness baked into this. The behavior change part is what we're designing for, which is how do we bring men together in a sticky enough way? Like how does that state change become compelling enough and yeah, sticky enough to, what do we need to do to build regularity, to build consistency? What level of men's group stuff do we do, right? Like, so we're still in the process of really um, declaring all the specifics. We're just in the process of experimentation, right? I guess that's the accurate way to say it. But my hunch is that we will be bringing in again, like there is nothing that I know of that is more inherently community building and self building at the same time than a regularly occurring in person men's group, right? If you actually nail that, it is huge. And I have a hunch that what and like I get emails and calls from people about their men's groups all the time, right? And one of the regular calls I get from men's groups is, we're stale, we're fucking bored. It feels like these dudes are just rehashing the same shit from 3 years ago. What the fuck, right?
Totally.
I have a hunch that if we combine the goodness of a regular occurring men's group with these, quarterly or periodic outward expressions, I just think a homeostasis can be found within a group and within a community that can take men's work from this weird fucking island to being a literally like normal generative part of a community. That's my hope.
I mean, I think you said it right there, man. It is community development. And like when I think about behavior change, it's like Mark Hyman has this great study about, I forget, maybe it's Rick Warren. You know, he's in Houston. He's like the big mega church pastor, and
Yeah,
he was talking about how Mark had gone in there. He gave a talk about health, and he found out that some incredibly large amount of the, what would they be called, the parishioners, like people who go to church. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
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 right.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it was like 70% of the church was obese, right? And so these people who'd struggled with obesity their entire life, but it was like the moment where they kind of rallied together in this weight loss challenge as a church, where it's like the number of people who got their weight in check was like 50% of the church. And it was like, wait,
Whoa.
like what is it? Like what changed? And it was just that they had other people that they could now talk to consistently about this thing that they wanted to do. And so I think it's just this. It's like to give people some sort of common object that they can rally around and do. It gives people a conduit to actually like meet people who perhaps aren't living life or focus in the same industry or have the same background. But when you can give them an objectively good thing that's bigger than themselves that they can do together, it's just an outlet to engage and like build community. Something I've always thought is like, when it comes to building community, like someone were to ask, like, oh, like, how do I find my people? How do I build community? Probably like the number one thing I would say to that person is don't go to events, go and contribute to events. Like, if you want to go and like find cool people, don't just go to a networking event, like reach out to the organizer and be like, hey, like, you need any help at the door? It's because what's going to happen is like now you're not just extracting, you're contributing. You're going to meet more people that way when you have that mindset. And I think that what you're doing with service is just giving all these people a very like just like baseline accessible conduit to contribute, which is one of the easiest ways to like truly connect people to community and like kind of bridge the divide that we might perceive. And it's just like, yeah, it's like once you have community, it's like so much of the things and the changes that people seek are inspired to look at by coming to one of these epic fucking weekends where it gets weird or whatever that is. It's like the service provides a community where indirectly the type of conversations that people are having at the retreat in the men's group will just continue more naturally, right? It doesn't have to happen in that
100%.
in the weirdness of a circle that you're doing every 2 hours. It's just like, no, those are just your boys now, and you're out in the woods, like cleaning up a trail, like whatever that might be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's right. It's this is a simple, organic. I don't really like that word as I say it, but I'll stick with it. It's like a naturalistic way to get people out of their head. Right? You can be in a sea of people but be incredibly lonely because you haven't sort of like relaxed or popped the bubble of like contracted self around you, right? And I mean, our what we're looking to do is like our symbol is going to be a pair of gloves, leather gloves, red, I don't know, maybe red gloves, I don't know what color, whatever, but like gloves, right? And I'm from fucking North Dakota. I worked on a pig farm when I was in high school, right? Like hands-on labor is is part of my background. And actually, just to tell the story, like one of my I'm fortunate because I can kind of map my life to a set of mentors for different chunks of my life. And in my high school years, my mentor's name was John Wiersma. He didn't know he was my mentor. We didn't talk about it like that, but he was my boss. And he was an alcoholic dude who had like a mouth surgery and he talked in a fucked up way and he had diabetes and yet he still just ate donuts and fucking I don't get it. He ate fucking donuts only, but then he drank sugar-free soda. He drank Tab and Fresca. I don't
It makes
fucking
sense.
understand. Doesn't
Checks
make
out.
any sense. And he smoked 2 packs of Camel Straights a day, and he chewed 2 tins of Copenhagen fine cut every day. So literally, he'd be like fucking like juicing fine cut Copenhagen and smoking all day. He smelled like pig shit. Anyway, I worked for him on his farm, but like all we did was, dig rocks and clean the barn and scrape shit and like we didn't talk. We didn't do any men's work shit. None. But the bond I had with that man was deep and true. Deep, deep, deep and true. We
Mm,
loved each other. Never
yeah.
said it. Loved each other deeply. anyway, I just feel like there is in today's world where we're here all the time, we're on this fucking screen all the time. There is such beauty, there is such capacity. I mean, and this is what we've been seeing too, right? So in Devin's been running a couple of these in Toronto, and they've been going and planting trees and like ripping out weeds and doing cleanup and stuff like that. And the guys are coming back just fucking lit,
Yeah.
just lit. And I think the first thing that's coming to their mind is like, my God, it feels good to use my hands. My God, it feels good to be in the sunshine with you guys, right? Like it's so simple, It's so simple. It's just like I think it touches something very, very old and primal and basic, but I don't know. I think that even takes it for me. It takes away to even name it that way. It's just fucking fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'll chime in here and say a little bit about why I was so excited to support is because this has been an area that's been really meaningful for me. I would say life changing for me personally, and like something that when people kind of, if I were to consider the question, like if I didn't need to make any money, right? People ask that question, like if you were fully set, like what would you spend your time on? And I had always said, I was like, I would go back and I would try and revitalize the service learning curriculum for students. I would try and revitalize a mandatory service year because I feel that that would be one of the most effective ways to decrease the polarity that's kind of tearing at the fabric of society that we see today, but that if you could give people a fundamental opportunity to contribute to the service of the nation as a whole, that like that would be the most efficient thing you could do to rebuild like a harmonious society. And for me personally, like I was like a bullshit party boy up until I was 21 and promoting in nightclubs and doing shit like that and really like full of insecurities, no real fulfillment. And like what changed my life was this opportunity to work with this organization, Dreams for Kids, that was supporting at the time primarily kids with disabilities to play sports. I had a volunteer opportunity with them. My dad asked me this question after I graduated. He's like, "What's the last thing you've done that you're proud of?" And I honestly, at first, I didn't have anything. And then I had this moment of awareness that came in. It was like, "Oh, the last thing you've done that you're proud of was the summer that you spent volunteering with these kids with disabilities." It wasn't my vocation, it wasn't profession. I was just volunteering, helping these kids. I was an athlete growing up, helping these kids with disabilities to play sports, whether it was water skiing or baseball with the White Sox or volleyball. And I was like, oh, like that was it. That was the most sustained period of fulfillment that I had experienced as a young kid. And then my dad just looked back at me in simple wisdom and just says, well, dude, just do that. And I had a job and I had to honor my responsibilities, but then I also was like, well, that's the thing that makes me fulfilled. Like I'll just start to give myself more to it. And we started this organization. It was the extension chapter, this organization, Dreams for Kids DC. And get this
You see
kid in
my
here, put him to work.
Did you see
I love it. This is a good dance. um, and while we were building this organization, like we were really fortunate. It's still around today, and it does sports for kids with disabilities and everything you can imagine, from like baseball to nationals to football with the Redskins. And now they rebranded So Kids Soar. There's an incredible woman, Glenda, who runs it today. But what we were doing, we were running that organization, and we just had this thought, which was like, okay, if the most empowering thing I've ever really experienced has been the opportunity to serve others, right? That's what gave me a sense of fulfillment and value. I was like, we were working with kids with disabilities who were oftentimes kind of disregarded as like recipients of service, you know what I mean? And like not those who were contributors. And we were like, well, how do we flip the model and actually present these kids? Oftentimes those are disenfranchised, with opportunities to volunteer and to create projects that could raise money for kids in the city who didn't have houses, or like transitional housing, didn't have food. And so we created a program that helped our kids to then start to do that. And like it was like that was the shift. It's like when we can transition from just service to self to service to others, it's like the most accessible conduit of purpose, of meaning, of value. And I was just like, how do I share that thing that transformed my life with other people? And then when you started this, I was like, a community that I'm passionate about, of like those in men's work, but giving that same opportunity of like, how do you like, sure, give people an opportunity to do the work, and then go do some fucking work, like actually go and like make it about something bigger than ourselves together. And so I'm stoked that you are doing this. I think it's much needed. And I really do think that it is one of the most practical ways to build community. And what I'll say for people who are listening to this is this idea that when a lot of people think about service, like I would say some of the resistance I imagine people have is like, I don't have time.
Yeah.
And I would just say it's like, so I'm going to invite you to think about it differently, which is that if you don't have time because you're raising a family, you have a job, you have limited time, I'm just going to ask you, like, do you have friends? Do you care about community? And what
Mhm.
I will offer you is that even the people that you want to spend time with, if you have people that you want to spend time with, your time out on a service project, whether that's in a food kitchen, whether that's like at a trail restoration, like being physical, being active, doing something service oriented, is going to be such deeper, more valuable, more connective time with those people. Which is that, like, it's not just like, oh, I'm doing this just to give back. Yes, you are, but what Manpower is doing is, I really believe, giving it this
Mhm.
community aspect that, like, oh, actually, this is just a really valuable way to deepen the relationships with men who are people on a similar path
Yeah.
in my community, which is such a powerful part of it. So I'm stoked on many levels, man, and I'm excited to hear from you guys. Like, what's the dream of, like, if you're just helping us to paint a picture of where you see it going, like when this thing is fully functioning, and then we'll get
Yeah.
later to like what do you need right now, and what are the opportunities for people to plug in, support, but like what's the vision, like if this thing is fully spun up, what does it look like?
I mean, I think at its fullest expression, it looks like a decentralized organization that sprouts local groups all over the fucking globe, right? I mean, we have a couple analogs we're looking at, right? Like AA does something very, Alcoholics Anonymous and other anonymous groups does something very different than what we're doing, but they have an elegant and wildly powerful process for people to self-propagate their own groups and communities, right? I mean, talk about something that's brought community to millions of people, billions of people, maybe. So our dream would be that we have an interactive map on our website that has a little pin or some little symbol that shows all the groups, and it's just become it's a grassroots movement that spreads around the world. And I mean, again, this is aspirational, but uh, we believe that the men who would truly get involved in one of these groups and get in the rhythm and the practice of meeting together and doing good work, I feel no question about a noticeable improvement in their mental health and how they feel about themselves and leadership skills and what it opens up for them in the world, right? And so on the micro, on the individual or local level, what I see is, I guess, a return of like healthy male or masculine leadership, and like seeing that as a vitamin that's been missing from our communities to a great extent, and just sort of like seeing like the flourishing. And that's what we've been feeling as we've been running these experiments, right? It's just like, oh my god, it's kind of like this thing that we all kind of know is possible, but we can't name it, we don't know what it is. And what it is just like, I mean, one of the things that I've been saying for a long time is I think probably the biggest unused resource on our planet, planetary resource, is the energy of is the good-hearted energy of men. I
Hmm.
feel like that is like if we could actually mine that, I can't think of anything that would have a more transformational effect in our communities and our society, right? And so this is ideally a way to bring some of that forth. So we would love this to catch, right? We would love this to catch. We envision having a conference each year somewhere in the summer and having leaders from groups all over the country or all over the world to come in and get more training and have community and be honored for their work, right? We would love these stories to be shared on, all the streams of media, right? We would love to just be an example of the goodness of men, and then allow that, hopefully guide that to spread. So I mean, that's like it's not hard to sort of picture, like, oh my god, if this went all the way, it would look like a global network of good-hearted men who are doing really, really sort of precise, helpful work locally, right? And I guess I would just say, and not to get too intellectual about this, but one of the things that was happening as we were building this. Are you familiar with like the language of the meta crisis? I'd assume you are.
On loneliness.
The meta crisis refers to like a series of overlapping, compounding global issues that are kind
Well,
of defining our age, right? So
break it down. Yeah.
yeah, rampant technology, political instability, the biophysiological like unhealthiness, the just like all of these things that could ultimately be real bad news for humanity, right? So if you put that all together, it's called the meta crisis. And so what we're kind of running here, what we have been running internally is just that our sense or my sense is that we hear all of this stuff about the state of the world and it puts us in a state of freeze, and because we can't fix all these big problems, right, individually or collectively, we don't know what to do. What do we do when the politics are so fucked and we're worried about civil war? What do we do when there's the fact that AI might take my job in 2 years? Like there's nothing to do, right? So that energy of fear gets stuck. And so part of what we're visioning here is we want to create an outlet for men to do something with that energy, right? And it's a little bit of a leap here. I'm not saying this is like a very simple, clear narrative, but I think the basis is that people are struggling, our communities are struggling, our brothers are struggling, our moms are struggling. There's like people have these things in their life and we don't know how to fucking do anything that makes a difference. And this isn't a direct, right? This isn't like, oh, I'm going to go clean up my elderly neighbor's backyard and all of a sudden my uncle won't have cancer. That's obviously not what I'm saying, but it's on a sort of like a health homeostasis basis. We need to do something with our charge, right? With our energy that's coming up. We care, right? Actually, maybe that's a way to frame what I see the big picture as is like I am just so fucking sick and tired and over the societal sort of dominant memes and images on men and masculinity. I'm just so fucking sick of it, right? Because it's not like we're seeing such not the whole picture, right? And I think maybe people listening, like you can, like if I say men are fundamentally good, maybe you can catch on to that a little bit. Maybe that'll land, but I would guess for a lot of people, it's like, oh, wait a second. Wait, are they? Are they? You know? And the answer is, of course, they fucking are. And we're just not expressing it. It hasn't like I feel like this moment in time we don't have we don't have the venues or the structures. I mean that's not true. Like dads are fucking loving the shit out of their families every day and they're taking risks and building things and doing things for good. But the narrative just isn't there. So I guess biggest aspiration is that we could fucking start to maybe have a little bit of a foothold for a narrative shift on what the fuck a man actually is and how good we actually are at our core.
Yeah, man. And for the guys who are listening to this, or the ladies who love them, like how, at least right now and then down the road, what are the most efficient ways for people to plug in to this? Like you had talked about, and I think this is such a brilliant strategy, that there are millions of people out in men's groups of some capacity or just like social groups. But like for people who are listening to this who are like, yeah, like let's do this. What are the ways that people can plug in most efficiently right now? And like, what are the greatest needs?
Yeah, we have or we will by the time that this comes out, we're going to have our very V1 wireframe Instagram account and our wireframe first website, right? We're just literally at that stage. And we'll have a form on our website where you can, if this gets your interest, right? If you're curious, we'll have a form for you to get into contact. We're going to be running our first sort of dispersed uh, groups experiment in the next handful of months, right? So if anybody's really stoked on this and you're like I would love to get a group of guys together in my community, I would love to help you start this. If you wanna get your hands dirty, literally, you can get in contact and we will start putting that together.
Cool. And then what about people who might want to support this through a philanthropic lens, donors?
Yeah, yeah, great question. We're going to be formally doing our first fundraising campaign in the end of Q3 and the beginning of Q4 this year. It's imminent. It's happening. Um, everything is set up, and yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, you're what else should I share about that, Andrew? I mean, I guess in this we should have said at the very beginning, but your advisement and your support on this has been deeply helpful and really helpful, and this is one of the areas that that I not fully turning to you like solely, right? But like I appreciate your perspective on it as
Thanks,
well.
brother. Yeah, I appreciate that, and like honored to be able to support. And I think that when you look at people who are active in the philanthropic space, people who are looking to make their donation dollars go to things that feel aligned and are having a tangible impact. Again, like we've talked about the meta crisis, we've talked about male loneliness, and again, just to codify that a little bit of like statistics about male loneliness, like Gen Z, you're looking at like 50% of men consistently showing up as lonely. You're looking at, in some studies, like 15% of men saying that they have no friends, which if you look at the distribution of how many friends men have, zero is actually the most common answer there is because of how it's distributed. But zero is the most common number of friends that men have, and
And
then
these statistics lead into statistics like the fact that the suicide rate for boys aged 10 to 15 or 10 to 14 has tripled in the past 11 years. And suicide is the second leading cause of young men in our country today, right? There's a trail you have to walk between the loneliness and that, but it's deeply interconnected.
totally. So again, like there is a very real crisis that is taking hold, and this is a very direct pathway to address that, as well as have direct impact in local communities. So if you are connected to philanthropic organizations who care about like any of these more meta issues like loneliness, but also those that are just involved in direct community action, like this is a really powerful way to do that, like service learning and whatever that might be. Like I'd really invite you to get in touch. And like the organization is being run incredibly lean. There's like a very small administrative component, but also like this is so distributed that there's really like not a need for a ton of administrative overhead for a lot of work to get done. Like it really is like just like engineering and cultivating a ton of manpower, a ton of volunteer effort to get involved here. And I think that outside of the direct impact that I see manpower having, I think it is also emblematic of a shift like towards like, well, as we're heading into this world of exponential technological change and like the way that we contribute in society and find purpose is rapidly changing. It's like this is like one of the last bastions of where we're going to derive hope is just getting directly involved in communities in our local areas. And I think that this is like, again, like Dan's already shown an incredible ability to create movements and to create media that supports that and really like showcase what's possible. So I've got full belief that like we're really at like the beginning of something really new that's going to present a really powerful movement to the masses. And so it's an exciting time to get in. And so like for anyone who's been looking for something to get behind, we've been talking about the power of service, and it's not just a volunteerism, but if you have the capacity to
Mhm.
donate on a higher level, rally some people where you're at, like, that's a really easy way to plug in here as well.
Thank you, dude. I'm gonna memorize what you just said, and the next time I'll share that.
Well, it's
So
fun about this stuff, man, because it's so
yeah.
easy and effortless, and like really does just make sense on so many levels. Like I'll share like another anecdote that feels relevant for this conversation, which is this idea of like I often talk about Maslow's amended hierarchy of needs. You
Hmm.
know that one? Yeah, it's
I
like
think I've seen you. Yeah, I think maybe I saw your article on it. Did
yeah,
you
so
write on
there's
it? Yeah.
it's this idea about purpose, and like for the longest time, like the foremost model on human development was Maslow's hierarchy of need. And so
Hmm.
you've got physiological safety, emotional safety, belonging, esteem, and at the very top you'd have self-actualization. And like everyone for since it was created in like the 50s thought that okay, so the peak expression of being a human is self-actualization, becoming who you're supposed to be, like really manifesting your full potential. But Maslow secretly like always kind of hated his model. Like he was like, that's incomplete, like this is not it. But it still just like propagated, and he has journal entries of him like kind of putting it down. And towards the end of his life, he developed a relationship with Viktor Frankl. And so Viktor Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning, Holocaust survivor, preeminent scholar on purpose and human meaning. And what Maslow realized in his dialogue, they were like journal entries, back and forth letters, was that the peak expression of being a human was not self-actualization. It was actually this idea of self-transcendence. Is that, and even if we want to actualize the self, our goal must be bigger than the self. Because if we're just trying to actualize the self, then as soon as I'm expressing my full potential, there's a new precipice of potential that is immediately available. And so he was like, so you have to connect to something that's greater than the self. And like, I think that that's what this does on such an immediate level. It's just like shows you, it's like, oh yeah, I have a body. I have some amount of time, however small you may think it is. And like,
Yep.
you can contribute that into a cause that's meaningful. You can do it with great people. And so, I just love this whole movement of like, do the intrapersonal work, but then also get out into the world, like,
Yeah.
put it to use. So don't make it just about us, like carry it forward, put it into something worthwhile.
My favorite parties are both profound and incredibly practical, right? And I'm using the term party in a loose way, right? My favorite things in the world are both deeply profound and deeply practical. I love when we get to just do normal human shit in normal human time, and that it is like at the same time on another level, it is doing something really, really big and really meaningful. And I think that's the heart of what we're building here is that um, you know, we have the honor to live in a really wild, wild time and to know how to operate. There's an element of initiation built into what we're doing too.
For
And
sure.
without going on a huge tangent about it, the way that I look at initiation today is that it fundamentally is something that answers the following three questions. Like, who am I actually, right? Where do I belong? And what am I to do, right? Like, what do I do? Those fundamental questions are, I guess, part of what traditionally an initiatory process would bring you to, right? You would go through your rite of passage and you would come out with answers to that for that stage of life, right? The thing about it though is that in the old I don't know the human past, right? I think those questions probably weren't. This is my thought. Those questions weren't so out for sale before, right? Like my assumption is that knowing who you were, where you belonged, and what you're supposed to do was oftentimes handed to you, even in the course of my life, right?
For
Like I
sure.
grew up in the fucking 80s, and it was like, who am I? Well, I'm a little kid who goes to church, right? And like, where do you belong? I mean, with my family. And what am I to do? Well, I'll go to college and have kids and die, right? Like it was
Yeah,
not mysterious. Today, these questions are fucking dominant. You know, we're like
totally.
out of our gourds. Who the fuck are we? And where are our people? And what am I supposed to do with my
What
life,
does it
right?
mean to
So
be human? Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So so I think I've been doing a lot of work around initiation and to fit that into manpower and what we're doing here is like this isn't meant to be some dramatic, ceremony. This is meant to be the basic cultural building blocks, right? Like of community and togetherness, where we're actually doing things together and we get reflection from other people, we get feedback, we start to know ourselves. And like you said, the core here is there is something simply and elegantly, but very on a basic level, transcendent about the whole thing, right? Like as a dad, there is a huge flip, there's a huge initiation, there's a huge revolution in consciousness, which is like, oh shit, I'm not most important anymore, right? Doing these service projects are a bite-sized, healthy, nibble or snack version of that. It's like, okay, like I don't have to put myself first. And then when we do that, we realize how fulfilling and feeding it is to our own soul.
Dude, yeah, I got to nerd out and respond on that one because I think that you are speaking to something that's really important. And like when I think of initiation, when I think of rites of passage, I think that there's so many corollaries here that are important to touch on. But like if you just look at, like I'll oftentimes call it like Peter Pan syndrome of just like a generation of like young men who are kind of floating
Hmm.
aimlessly without clear purpose and like really like with this focus on the self. And if you look societally, like we had a lot of rites of passage that were initiations into like a service to other versus service to self that were just inherent in being, I'll just speak to America specifically, but it's like if you look at them, like number one, marriage. It's like when were men typically getting married 50 years ago when they were 19, right? Like that
Yeah,
was like
yeah.
19 years old, you were committing to serving someone else and you were being witnessed in that commitment by a group of people, which is like an important aspect of rites of passage, is that it's like one thing if I just got married in a ceremony and never told anyone, like, sure, but that identity of like, oh, I'm a husband now, being reflected by a community and throughout history, like, those like epic kind of ceremonies, like they all involved the tribe, like being witnessed in the new identity, the shift. And like you said, like for a while, what it meant to be a man was handed down, which is true and was like necessary for the thriving of society, because typically to be a man fundamentally just meant that you had responsibility. You were coming from being a dependent to being a person who had responsibility. And in, ancient civilizations, like your responsibility was pretty much like, you got to go to war and you got to fucking hunt, make sure that we got food. And like, that's it. That's what it means. That's your responsibility. It was clear. And then we got into modern society and it was like, oh, like there's not such a rigid role for you to fill. And even more so now, where
Yeah.
it's just like, well,
Yeah.
what is my response? How do I contribute in this place where computers can do literally everything I can do 100x better? And so even like what we was just talking about, it's like these built-in rites of passage for like marriage to child rearing, early 20s to conscription in the military to
Yeah.
religious rituals, like all that have kind of like gone by the wayside or decreasing significantly. And so it's like in this world where what it means to be a man is now more fluid, which is ultimately a good thing, that no one's telling you like what it means to be a man. But I think that so much of what's beautiful about this is like that there's not someone who's going to tell you what it means to be a man, but it's powerful to be in that question with a group of people who can see you in it and like hold you accountable for what do you think it means to be a man? And like you got to have a
Mhm.
fucking answer. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but like let's go through these things together where we're asking these big questions, finding an answer that makes sense to us, and building a community that will reflect it back to you and be like, okay,
Yeah.
go be that guy, go do that. And so because of, again, another reason why I think this will work is because it's not just getting guys together to go and do a service project. You're grounding it in this
Yeah.
deeper exploration of community and meaning and purpose. And like that's just infinitely more accessible when you're doing that with your hands in the dirt or like committing to something that's purposeful. So I mean, again, man, I think it's the beginning of something that I feel is like a spark that can really like spark something really massive here. And I'm really excited to support it and to in whatever ways I can. And I mean, for people who are interested in getting in touch with you and the organization, like what's the easiest way to plug in right now?
Yeah, Manpower Community is our handle on Instagram and our website, manpowercommunity.com. Personally, if anyone wants to just reach out to me, I'm happy to put some contact in the show notes here and just make an easy personal introduction as well.
Yeah. I feel like I'd be remiss to like let you go here without maybe just adding some high level thoughts of, because I really do see that you were like one of the catalytic voices of this new wave of men's work that emerged like post Me Too era. And I'm curious now, you look at that really like early 2020s. Every Man was started when? Like probably 2019, 2018,
2016.
2016. Got it. And so
2016.
that's right. Yeah, 2016. So looking at like what has transpired, like what is it that you now know that perhaps you would have done differently? Or what do you, and like, so let's start there. And then the second
Yeah,
question here, which we can get to, is like, what do you think that movement needs most now?
great. Yeah, I love that question. So what would I have done differently? I would have probably not done much differently at the outset. I feel like our inception and we lit a little fire on a retreat in Massachusetts at the end of 2016, and that just like there was Tinder around, so it just not Tinder the app. I mean, I guess that was around, but there was fuel. There was fuel for the movement to pop, right? And the that was like right pre Me Too, and just a series of events happened, and we had a flash, and we came online. Um, there's organizational things I would do differently, which I'll set aside for now. But movement, sort of like what I would have done differently would have been to I guess I kind of alluded to it or spoke it earlier, but I would have hopefully found the grounding and the I don't know wisdom or maturity to to create more integration, to create more opportunities for. I would have helped strengthen these powerful events, which often like landed like ayahuasca ceremonies, right? Like they were just really fucking powerful, and they blew people open, and they changed perspective, and they did all of that, and then they went home and kind of struggled, right? Had a hard time knowing what to do with it all. So I think I would have recommitted and confirmed the group formation, the local group formation. I would have like doubled down on that, and I would have created more of a online community earlier, so that we would have had a more consistent container for people to be in. Because what we had was just kind of like a wild collection of men all over the place who got impacted. And I think it was on the whole, net it was good, right? But I do think we could have done a lot more to support men through the process of what they were going through. And then I think it's in the same line, but I would have brought more. Well, it's interesting. I'm curious what you take, right? But like, I think what we did in a bold way was say, "Hey, emotions. Hey, vulnerability. Hey, like this." And part of the reason why I think it worked was that, like you said, like I come from a hunting and adventure background, right? Like a wilderness background. So I think there's enough dudes, and I know that because I've heard thousands or hundreds of dudes tell me this directly, is like, hey, it was safe for me to go into this emotional gushy shit because you looked like a normal dude, because you wore a camo hunting, because I saw you on Meat Eater, right? Because I know, there was this sort of confirmation of traditional masculinity, kind of implicit in it. But I also, what I've come since that point is to recognize how important, not just as like a messaging tool, right? But if I could go back and change things, but it's less about going back and changing. It's just
What you
evolving
know, yeah,
now.
what you
It's
know now,
evolving now
for sure.
is highlighting and honoring and confirming the fucking goodness in traditional masculinity, equally or in balance with the new, right? And I think when you go through a period of change, right at the beginning, you get a flush of the new, and that's like you're all into that new, right? Like a new restaurant comes in and you go fucking eat there 1,000 times. But then, you kind of forget, oh well, this other stuff is really great too. So it's a reclaiming, and it's more of a sense of wholeness as the point, right? A sense of like a description or a frame of the whole human, the whole man, kind of really centered as the whole point, right? Like what we went off, like our point was to liberate emotions and vulnerability and connect men and get them not lonely, and I think we did a fair job in that first push of that. And we left the rest of the man sort of behind. And again, I don't think we did anything wrong there,
No,
but
totally.
now it's just a process of, okay, let's bring all those fucking pieces together.
Yeah, totally. And then what about if you zoom out and you just look at men's work as a whole? And like, I know that you've really committed a lot of your journey now to fatherhood in a beautiful way. You're working with a lot of
Mhm.
leaders and entrepreneurs. But I'm just curious, like when you look at this men's work space, this like latest movement, where it's at now, what do you think that, uh, what do I call it? Let's call it the movement of modern men's work. Like, what do you think is most needed?
Normalization. Normalization. I,
What do you mean?
I, I think I think that it's time for. Well, here's an analog, right? I think 1970s United States yoga maybe came over in the 60s, and you would have like maybe six like known yoga studios, and it was this like very strange niche thing, or sort of fringe thing. And now you look at the 2000s or where we are now, and it's like phew, it's like it's everywhere, right? It has normalized into our culture. I think that both the inner things that we're talking about in the men's world of emotionality and purpose and all of these things, again, there's still there's like an inflection that still turns off probably 97% of the American population, right? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that, I'm not sure, but maybe I need to update that in my mind. But I think that in the same way that Manpower is bringing this to, I have a hunch that Manpower is going to be way more accessible and way more interesting to a lot larger swath of dudes than any other current men's work organization out there. So whatever that process is, I think, plain language, integration in our lives, and somehow moving that weird men's work island closer to the shore, and eventually creating a full on fucking bridge.
Yeah, beautifully said, man. That part definitely resonates. And so we're going to include all the information of how you can plug in the show notes. And then I kind of just want to let us end on a note of like, just you tapping into your heart, speaking to any guy who is on a journey, craving more community, deeper purpose, connection to self. Like, what would you say to that man about like how service, this type of experience in their life might benefit them? Like, what would you want them to know?
Yeah, I would say that healing is going to get old and stinky, and you don't need maybe as much as you think. And getting in action and moving your body and moving forward will actually catalyze the healing that you might, think you need all of the therapy and all of the things and all the experiences to fix before you can go do your thing. It's done. It doesn't work that way. Go do the thing. Go fucking do the thing and take care of yourself along the way, and don't do it alone, right? So yeah, reach out. Let's do this. Let's clean some shit up. Let's make our world better. Let's tend our communities. Let's tend each other. Let's step up and be responsible, right? And like, if you said earlier that it's a good thing, that we're not told what being a man is anymore. I think on one hand I agree with you, on one hand I don't agree with you. Like, we need to see good men. So let's go be fucking good men. And let's go do it together, and let's let our boys watch us, Let's just go fucking do it.
Yeah. I think that my perspective there is one that is privileged because I've had so many teachers and like the opportunity to do so much of this work. But I also, I think that my perspective there is kind of privileged, and I appreciate even challenging it because it's like, it is helpful to have a preset model of values and principles that someone can look at and be like, this is good. It makes it more accessible. You look at religion and these other, it's like, no, here's what's good. And like en masse, that's helpful. It's like,
We
just got to be
don't
careful.
have
Yeah.
enough time for every single one of us to do 20 years of fucking deep diving to know what to be a man actually means.
Totally.
We don't have the fucking time for it.
Yeah.
It's not
Totally,
gonna
brother.
work.
Yeah, man. Well, dude, here's to the evolution of like doing your work and now like getting to fucking work, man, and getting hands in the dirt, hands into our communities. I'm all for it. I'm honored that I got tapped to support in some small way, and very excited to what's to come. So, anything else you feel like you want to share with folks before we head out?
No, thanks a lot, man. This has been fun.
Yeah, brother. Thanks so much. Keep an eye out. Manpower coming to a city near you.